We're now going to move into our second section, the second track rather, which we're calling craft. We're using the term a little bit liberally, meant to encompass multiple agency functions. We're not going to have time today to hit every agency discipline, but in this track, we're going to go deep into creative, media, and analytics. I'm going to start with creativity, right? How is AI reshaping the craft, the process, and the role of creative leadership? This session gets into the nitty gritty of what still needs a human hand and how to orchestrate the people and the machines to get to the big idea. Let's get into the session that we're calling the conductor and the code. I've asked my colleague Phil Stetler to lead this conversation with three chief creative officers from 4A's members agencies. Phil, I'll hand it off to you. Take it away, man.
Thanks, Jeremy. I appreciate it. Well, I think before we start, I'm going to set the stage a little bit. And I think you have to kind of go back to where all this started from. And I think if you look at Sam Altman, who famously said that AI is replacing 95% of what marketers do, or Mark Zuckerberg, who's asserting that Meta will auto-generate ads for us, or even there was a Guardian headline earlier that I really loved, which was the death of creativity. AI job fears stalk advertising industry. It just sounds terrifying, the whole thing. So it's obviously generated some real soul searching in our industry. I guess the question really is creativity dying or is it getting augmented? And today's creative leaders aren't just directing talent, they're really orchestrating tools, models, human imagination into something entirely new. So this session's really about the real world experiments, the misfires, the moments when AI genuinely elevates the craft. And I'm very pleased to welcome three creative all-stars to share their perspectives. First of all, Anthony Yell, Chief Creative Officer of Razorfish, Jamie Robinson, co-founder and CCO of JOAN Creative, and Jason Sperling, Chief Creative Officer of INNOCEAN. So with that, no further ado, I'm going to go straight into it. Anthony,
Yes.
when you first brought AI into your creative process, what changed immediately and what absolutely didn't change?
Well, Phil, that is a great question. And I would offer, I have to go back a few years to get to that point, to be honest with you. Now, the first thing is, initially, I don't think it actually got any faster. Workflow didn't get any faster. And to me, the reason why it didn't get any faster was because I was having to step outside of very normalized workflows that we had all got used to, step outside into completely new tool sets that were emerging at a speed that was unfathomable. And then once you worked in that tool set, you were having to learn completely new ways of actually manipulating and creating within it. Text to image and prompting was a completely new way of conducting the actual creation of artwork. And so, it became profoundly complex, to be honest with you, to continue to step out, learn these new techniques, bring that work back in. Now, I would say that what sort of stayed, or rather what I learned from that was that anything was possible. So my ambition went through the roof, but the orchestration of it became more complicated. And so I found that it to be quite challenging. Now, things have obviously changed. I was recently at Adobe Max in Los Angeles, and you can start to see companies that have sort of fundamentally owned workflow for many, many creatives, figuring out how to actually integrate all these tools in a more usable manner so that we can all become far more productive within the tools and the moments in between the tools. So, an open platform where you have access to not just their own models, but you can actually have access to all of Google's models. So you don't have to go outside to actually explore what model might make sense in that moment. Plus, like many companies, Figma, Adobe, etc., are starting to create node-based workflows where we ourselves as creatives can actually create the workflow that is most meaningful for us against the task that we're trying to complete. So I think the future is very bright, but I think the early days were sort of like, oh wow, this isn't as fast as I thought. But this is crazy in terms of what's possible. And I think the clear thing in terms of like what it absolutely didn't change, and I think is still probably a contemplative point for all of us, was it didn't remove the need for originality. If anything, it made the absence of originality more painfully obvious.
Okay, so if I took that question, we build on it to you, Jason. Where in the workflow is AI genuinely speeding things up, and where is it slowing things down, maybe secretly slowing it down?
Hmm.
Well, within the workflow, it's definitely moved the starting line up. I think people have talked about that for a while. There's no starting with a blank page anymore. You simply type in a few words and it spits out your first idea. Sometimes it'll, possibly give you something brilliant, but sometimes it'll give you, just a pile of first ideas.
Mhm.
I sort of liken it to a really talented intern that doesn't necessarily discern more than it just spits out things. So in terms of generation, those of us who are of an age know the days of staring at a blank page and know how frustrating it was to sort of start thinking about something. Uh, in terms of, a lot of us are still presenting ideas and trying to get approvals. That's completely changed and made it a heck of a lot easier to sort of show an idea in a way that feels like it's doing it justice. Where it's slowing things down, um, it's interesting. I think people and clients who are now seeing the benefits of it, the efficiencies of it, and some really great creative at times come out of it. They're probably of a mind that, hey, this stuff is easy. You prompt, it spits out, what you need. You can potentially do the whole. I don't need to go to necessarily an outside production company. I can build models and make it myself. But it is, I think people tend to forget that you have to embrace imperfection with AI. And if you are going for perfection and you are a fan of craft, it's not going to get you there. I think the latest was the Coca-Cola spot that they did over the holidays, which again they've been really early adopters and tried to show what's possible. But it took 71,000 prompts apparently to get to that 30-second spot, which, the people on both sides of the fence saying, was it worth it? And I would call that, I don't know where the financials ended up on that, but it certainly feels like it slowed things down when you're 71,000 prompts and then, all the finessing you have to do to the work after that.
Absolutely.
Phil, can I add to that? I mean, there's some crazy statistics relative to speeding things up and slowing stuff down. I've got a few, like McKinsey did a report halfway through this year in 2025, and one of the headlines was AI reduces pre-production cycles by 46%, which is amazing, but increases client-side review time by 22%. And I think part of this is sort of captured in another way. Like it's easy for us, as Jason pointed out, and I'm sure Jamie would corroborate, which is like we can produce millions and millions of ideas and iterations, but then just sort of like, the streaming services where you're paralyzed by choice, clients get paralyzed by choice. So we've sped up the generation standpoint, and I'm sure we'd all talk about whether those are all fantastic ideas or not, but the decisioning on the client side has actually slowed down. So like one side's gone up, one side's gone down. So it sort of accelerates everything except the moment you have to make to decide on what deserves to exist and move forward with. It's quite an interesting time.
Jamie, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's interesting. I think I have this theory that I've been like, I think that probably creative directors are probably the most trained people in all professions to use AI. And the reason why is because we are used to giving the good ones are blunt, direct feedback, doing it quickly on the spot, and really helping people shape their ideas in real time. And it's a skill that not many professions have because not many professions have spend majority of their days in creative reviews, but we do. And so therefore, over like the 20 years you become a creative director, you realize you probably have put in 20,000, 30,000 hours of creative direction, which is essentially what you need to do when you have an AI. You have an AI, you are creative directing it. And it's really interesting because, and you guys were saying, you said it's like, Jason, like it's like having the most talented junior, I believe it was you, Jason. And I thought that for a while, but then the more I started using it, this is gonna sound so fucking weird, but like I started to feel like it was an external version of my brain, but if my brain was as fast as it could be possible. And I think it's because as you're working with AI, you craft and you shift and you shape. Um, And I think that makes it a really personal thing, and I know, one of the things we talk a lot about is prompt engineering. And it's really interesting because because and I know you wanted to talk about like how do you train people to do prompt engineering. I actually think it's incredibly personal and it's almost impossible to train, in my opinion, to get it good, because you have to draw from your own personal references. Like there's the people on your team and they love like the most obscure indie crazy directors and old French new wave cinema, or they know Shane Carruth, and like these are all these kinds of things, and they will prompt it in one way. Me, I don't like, that's not my thing. Like I'm all about emotion. So when I prompt AI, I am completely prompting it through an emotive lens. And then you have people that are doing it, through visuals or through, and I think the thing is that you should build a stable of the old constant remains the same. You should build a stable of creatives with wildly different tastes, extremely diverse tastes and references, and they will bring their expertise to the prompts in a way that you don't want to replicate. Because guess what, honey? Even if you can replicate it for like one prompt, you're not going to be able to do it down the road. So I think the references we all bring and the expertise we bring are the things that really make prompts interesting.
So could
Love
I
it.
add to that, to be honest
Yeah.
with you? I mean, I would agree with you, Jamie. It's crazy. I got exposed to a creativity benchmark study that the 4A's commissioned along with a bunch of other companies. And really what they were trying to do was analyze which of the foundation models were better at creativity. And, like I went through the test myself because it asks you a series of questions, like, and it provides, like, if you're trying to solve this creative problem, is this answer better than that answer? And you don't know who the answer came from, but you select the one that you think is most resonant with you in terms of like how you would answer that question. And then it starts to tell you, oh, this is Llama, this is ChatGPT, this is Gemini, right? And then in the end, you end up with a scorecard of tools that might be more reflective of how you like to work. So outside of just the workflow, I think the self-selection to your point around sort of prompting and that individualization is also expressed in terms of how you connect with the tool itself, in how you're conducting it with your prompt, because you might find that you resonate way more with one versus another in terms of how it's responding to you, to be able to accelerate, thoughts in your head getting sort of manifested into something that you could translate to client value. So if you haven't done it, it's a fascinating thing. It will tell you where to go and what to look at. And then the deeper research is a bit intense, but very interesting.
And where do I find that? I love that.
I'll send you the link after this
Send
call.
me
I'm
the
just
link.
Jeremy and
Love
Phil
it.
will send
Thanks.
it too.
Jeremy will,
Thanks.
yeah, we'll definitely share that out.
I'll drop the
Yeah,
link in
Um,
the chat too.
yeah.
I wanted to jump over to the people side of things just for a moment. So if the creative function, or sorry, if the creative function is an orchestra, what is the role of a creative director today? So are you a conductor, a composer? Are you a quality control officer? How would you characterize it? Jason.
Oh, great. Um, well, I think let me dive deeper into that one because I do think that at least, and look, every agency out there, there are some are springing up that are sort of I would say the AI natives who are realizing they're capitalizing on this and sort of forming very specific AI agencies. And then there's, some of the more, say legacy ones, but have been around that are trying to figure out how do you create the agency of the future. And no doubt everybody is doing it, really rethinking things. And as we've thought about it, one of the things that's done on me is that, while the creative of the future is when it comes to AI is going to be a tool-driven job. You do still have a portion of the group if you're working on bigger brands that are doing brand building and looking for ways to break through that are going to be AI influenced. So they're going to be using the tools, but not necessarily driven by them. It's not going to be asset generation studio. It's going to be how do you use those tools to still arrive at big crazy ideas. Um, uh, so I think starting with that delineation is key. And then, the creative of the future, I think we all can say, at least for now, prompting is huge. I think it favors the writer, who's to some degree in the driver's seat to really be able to drive a narrative, but also to like I think we're all becoming directors in a way. You know, there's sort of this hybridization where you know the hats aren't as specific as they used to be. You don't even need to be a creative, really. You could be, you know, the client. You could be the receptionist. If you know how to use the tools, you can build things. But I do think that taste is going to govern so much of what we do. You know, I hope that the level of craft does not die. It's been in sort of a death spiral since, you know, since social came around, and it was sort of like, you know, stop being so precious about things when people are looking at it on a phone and not on a big screen. So here, I think we're seeing, you know, what will happen. The creative of the future, you know, hopefully has craft and an understanding of what great creative is. Yeah.
Can I add
So,
to that one again?
yeah,
Sorry,
of
I
course.
feel like that's my role.
Yes, great.
Sorry, man. But like, yeah, I mean, everybody throws around the notion of orchestration, right? Like that's probably the most common term used by anybody in our industry in terms of sort of like the complexity of what we're all trying to do now. I think the good news is like when I reflect on my journey to where I am, and I'm sure Jamie and Jason, like I feel like we've always been orchestrating, right? Because ideas live in living organisms, they live in culture, they live across platforms. You know, admittedly, there's been a plethora of platforms that continues to explode. So I think we're naturally very adapted to, you know, this wave that we're in. So I think it's just going to double down on sort of like, you know, being the person that can orchestrate it, but systems more so now, and systems thinking and structures are going to be a key part of it because, you know, even though we've been using computers, even though we've been, you know, living with Photoshop for 30 plus years and all these other bits and pieces, right? There's new tools that we have to adapt to, and they've got different ways of working. And so I do think that we are very adept at doing that. It's just a moment in time in terms of like how we modify ourselves to be able to get the best out of it. So I feel confident that we will get through this hurdle. And actually, I think creative people are more adaptable than most to be able to live in this moment.
Jamie, I want to divert to you just for a second because I know you loved this question. What is the one non-negotiable skill a senior creative must have that an AI model simply cannot learn?
I mean, I think, and maybe it ties into a little bit of how I would answer this last question. So I feel like my greatest attribute as a creative leader is as a creative director is like my receptors for what has like electricity or what can or maybe it's like I have like just a larger than you know most open kind of pathway to the heart that could like something gets fucking sent in and it goes boom, that's amazing. So that might be called taste, but there's something more emotional and deep to it that I don't know how to describe. If you think about the senior creatives right now, and so like as a creative director, I think my biggest my role, even with AI, any output is listening and understanding and being able to feel and being able to know what can make other people feel. As I think about senior creatives, I think that's probably a similar thing. And I think the ability to both receive and understand and identify what is that has the power to move people, and then how to then translate that into a sales tool. Like so selling, I think is probably the second half of that. Like they're two sides of the same coin. The ability to like manipulate emotion and like use emotion in a way that can be amplified out. And so I feel like that would be the thing that I would teach people to really do is to figure out how do you get excited about ideas and sell your ideas and get someone else excited about those ideas. Because if you can get that excited about the ideas and you can sell someone else to get excited about your ideas, then you can amplify them so that millions of people can get excited about your ideas. So that's the skill I would not change.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Okay, so you have a lot of changes going on in your departments. You probably have some new roles or titles that are emerging in those departments. What new roles are you seeing? And I guess the other question is, how are you managing morale for the sort of seasoned talent that are trying to weather this change?
Well, I can start. So the roles are like in the creatives, we still have creatives, but we have some creatives that are really, really adept and skilled at creating prototypes in ways that we wouldn't be possible in the past. And so what's really interesting about that is those are the ones that we turn to again and again and again and say, hey, Parker, can you help us make this? Like, we have this pitch, we have this idea, can you help us make it? And he's like, yeah, cool. He's very cool about it. But he's also teaching other people how to prototype. Now, prototyping is kind of like hit or miss. Sometimes you make a prototype and you're like, oh man, we're going to show that. And that's not going to be anywhere near as good as it could be. Like, especially when you're doing with stuff with that needs to strike emotion. But sometimes you'll prototype something and you're like, oh my God. Okay, so here's a funny story. I was doing a pitch and I was prototyping. Okay, I am a writer by trade. I usually would have to go and say, "Hey, designer, can you help me make this comp for this idea we had for like a campaign, like a big idea, big campaign." But it was like late at night, and I was like, "I'm not going to bother my designers. It's so late. It's like after hours." So I had a glass of wine and I started to make a comp. So in the comp, there were two people. There was like this one set of main characters who quite honestly sucked intentionally. And then there was another group of main characters who there were nemesis who also sucked. And what ChatGPT did, it took the image, it made these characters that were really kind of bummers. And then it took the same characters that were part of the nemesis gang, same exact faces, but put them in different outfits. It was a great creative solution. I didn't come up with it. ChatGPT came up with it. But I was able to do that. And I learned how to do that prompting from one of my young teammates. So I think these prototypers are becoming more and more important, at least in our organization.
Bill, can I add to that? I mean, another stat just to put it in context, right? Like according to, I think it's LinkedIn Talent Signals, there were 34 new creative AI hybrid roles that were posted variously across the industry. 34, you know what I mean? I think you'll see a massive expansion as different organizations choose to approach different parts of adapting to this in different ways, not by just skill sets, by giving that skill set a specific role that creates clarity in terms of how they act within the organization to create work. I don't think that it'll end up being 34 in a couple of years from now. It'll probably expand. Everybody will come up with unique ones, and then everybody will realize that some of them are the same. And then it'll be like something that's really definitive. I don't know what it will be. Do you know what I mean? Like we as an industry, I think we'll have to go through that journey together.
I'd love to hear if you can point to a piece of work, either internal or for a client, where the AI didn't just automate a task, but it really unlocked, something novel or culturally resonant that your human team might not have ever conceived of on its own. I think Jamie had a great example. I'd throw that to Jason first, just to hear what you're thinking.
An automated task that we hadn't thought of
Well,
before.
and more of a creative task. So if you came up with something that you wouldn't have come up with otherwise, rather than just using AI for efficiency, it was something that helped you generate something different or new.
Hmm. Um, I can't say that I mean, we've played with it, but I don't know if it's been in the most absolutely novel way quite yet. I think we're still in that phase where it's like now that it's front of house for the most part, and that lawyers have sort of, are along for the ride a little bit more. Now we're really starting to see the sort of the gloves come off. And I would say that's where really, we're really at that precipice now. So I can't say necessarily that I've seen that. I mean, I would say, like everyone, we're really thinking about our clients and where we can start building proprietary large language models for them, where they we sort of bespoke AI engines to help really unlock more possibilities, more efficiencies for them. But in terms of big creative ideas, and I may get flogged when I get back, and people telling me like, you didn't say this.
Mhm.
I I don't know if we've actually got that story yet, but it sounds like Jamie does. So Jamie, go for it.
No, it was that one, but actually, there's another
Yeah.
one I can say really quickly. Was we have a because it's really interesting to do it and think to create things that are impossible. So we have our head of design. She's always wanted to design furniture, but she's not a furniture designer. She doesn't have the skill, and nor does she have the money to be doing that. So she created a whole series called Artificial Objects, where she trained a model on the different types of furniture that she is passionate about, and she, I think, put in quite hundreds of different styles, all different kinds of like eames and all this kind of crazy things, and then just started throwing at it different things that the furniture could be made out of, and then started asking it for solutions, some ideas for different things. So she made like a beautiful couch out of like toothpaste, and she made like bubble gum, and it's like they're like completely impossible, but they are only made because of AI. And I think watching her like create that project and work on that project, and it was a passion project that everybody started getting involved in, and all the different designers started chucking in ideas. Then it was something that was really cool because they could never do that normally, but they got to see their creations in somewhat real life.
I love it. Anthony, I'd love to give you a chance to respond as well.
Can I jump in there
Yeah.
before I forget? Because actually I do have a story. It's a friend of mine. We've worked together several years. Now she's over at Google, of course. So I think she's like by law required to play with the tools. But she did this really cool thing where she brought her kids' stories to life. And actually, instead of just books, they actually created movies together with those characters, and I thought was a really interesting unlock of how do you plus up an experience that's sort of already out there. And I would just say too, while the door's open for me to say it, it's like as I look at creatives, and Jamie seems to really like you find the ones who are really just like digging into it and just give them free rein. It's like I tell every creative that's either between jobs or breaking in, like do not start as an art director writer in the traditional sense. It's like make sure you're establishing yourself through AI projects and show that you're really fluent, embracing it, because that's what we're all looking for. It's really, we understand the changes, we understand what we need, and you are going to be the most sought after person, even if you haven't been for the last year.
That's great advice. Anthony, I want to give you one chance to share because I know you must have a dozen
Yeah,
stories.
Phil, you're gonna have to remind me of the question. Sorry, man.
Oh, just where AI has helped you unlock something that's truly novel or culturally resonant that you might not have come up with just the human team alone.
Yeah, there was a publicly piece of work that was produced earlier this year in partnership actually with Google, which was for the AI Lighthouse. And as Jason pointed out, exposure to the tools, use the tools in interesting ways to create work that would otherwise be impossible, make the impossible ad possible effectively. And so in the end, we used a variety of tools, one in particular to be able to mine a treasure trove of Google reviews, to be able to see hidden stories and narratives in the Google reviews that, to be honest with you, any human would take forever to do. And from that, we were able to quickly create characters from the feedback that people were expressing in the reviews around their experiences, specifically in and around Orlando. So, like, I don't know whether we would have ever come up with the final idea if we hadn't had the tools to be able to do that sort of legwork, to be able to find something as interesting as something that was deeply hidden in all of the reviews.
I love that. Absolutely love it. Let me chime on. Just we're almost out of time here, so I know Jeremy's going to jump in, but I was going to throw one last question,
Lightning
which was
round.
around. Yeah,
Lightning
Jeremy,
round.
do you need to?
And I'll go for it, but lightning round.
All right, lightning round, just as quickly as you can. What's your non-negotiable red line policy for AI generated assets, or basically protecting use? You have one that just really is an absolute with your staff.
Here's the soundbite for you. If you can't prove where it came from, don't use it.
I like it.
Yeah.
Jamie?
And then if you like, like you know, there's plenty of organizations out there trying to figure this out. There's one, the C2PA Coalition for Content Authenticity and Provenance. Most of the major companies are part of that, both publishers and holding companies and various different mid-sized organizations. So definitely check it out because they're trying to figure out how to make this make more sense. And then there's a legacy one called the CAI, not related to the one that we all think, but the Content Authenticity Initiative. And those two organizations are trying to make sure that, you know, there's authenticity and there's sort of a credentialized list of where the content came from in the first place. And then there's some models, as we all know, that are trained on secure and safe data, where, you know, effectively there's the ability to guarantee that you can use it. It has commercially available usage. I won't say which one, but I think it's pretty obvious at this point.
So I will say thank you guys, all of you, Phil, Jamie, Jason, Anthony. It was a great conversation, and it was a fantastic look at how creativity is evolving and not evaporating. I love that the creativity benchmark study came up as well. I dropped a link to that in the chat. It's definitely worth spending some time if you haven't already seen it. We did a webinar on it that I dropped into the chat as well.